Oh, well, here we are again. Here we are again, sitting in front of our computer screens, talking about, God knows what this time.
This is interesting. This is the first time we've talked about a movie that doesn't exist. Isn't that crazy?
Well, certainly in the minds of some, this doesn't exist, as with, several movies that have come up on this show. Though technically we are covering, this would be our second film in the lineage of this franchise, if you want to call it that. Though
Is
it
it
is a
though?
remake. I mean,
Is
it's a
it
re it shares a name, some similar
very
elements.
specifically? It shares a name with the original Child's Play film
Yes.
from the 80s, directed by Tom Holland, who I've had the chance to talk to on a few occasions. We actually discussed Child's Play, the original Child's Play for Fangoria. So maybe I'll
Yeah.
link that down below because uh, it seemed to be a very interesting production. And I don't think people realize kind of how ahead of its time that movie was in terms of the effects, in terms of the production team bringing Chucky the Killer Doll to life. I think we take that for granted now, but it's kind of like the shark in Jaws. But as Tom pointed out, it's not a thing where you can hide the shark, right? Leave
Yeah.
that up to the imagination. I mean, like Chucky has to really take center stage at some point. Um, Now, this movie's basically a little glimpse into what Child's Play would have been if it hadn't had to fight those kind of production obstacles and it were made today.
This is an interesting glimpse into if a movie was made today. We always talk about like movies on this show that were either remakes or, what they do right and in bringing that film, that source material into the modern age, as they say. We covered oh no, never mind. We I had a dream one time that we talked about this movie called 13 Ghosts.
Oh my God.
And in that dream, we discussed how that movie was pretty good at bringing that story into a modern, or that film into a modern
Yeah.
setting for the time.
Now I
And
have a glimpse. Now I have a glimpse into what MLK would have been like as a podcaster. I
Well,
had a dream that I reviewed 13 Ghosts.
yeah, felt some parts kind of, I guess, felt like a nightmare, but other but folks, we're here today to talk about a very specific movie.
Yes,
But
get it
before
back
we
on the
do,
rails. Get this
yes,
back on the rails.
before we do, of course, if you're coming to the show for the first time, we are your hosts. My name is Connor, aka an available sponsor for anyone else attending Aubrey Plaza Anonymous. Stay strong, my brothers. And of course, I'm joined by director, writer, producer, the man, Mr. Gabe Tice, and we're talking today about a remake that I thought at first was pretty well received. I thought it would not be eligible for this show, but weirdly enough, Gabe brought us the famed Child's Play 3, or forgotten in many ways, Child's Play 3, early on in our show's history. I believe that might have been our first YouTube upload. But now we're here talking about Child's Play from 2019, a remake of the original Child's Play. Instead of having Brad Douriff step behind the curtain to voice the role of Chucky, we have Mark Hamill, legendary voice actor and actor Mark Hamill of Star Wars fame, of
Voice
Batman the
actor
Animated
and
Series
actor.
fame.
You've segregated voice actors from
I
real
feel
actors.
No, I feel like I have to for Mark because both of those career trajectories are so different. Mark Hamill so
Yeah.
well as Luke Skywalker. This guy is like one of the most famous characters of all time as an actor, but sometimes you don't even realize. Like I've talked to people who don't even know that he plays the Joker in Batman the Animated
When I
Series.
was a kid watching Batman the Animated Series, I remember thinking to myself, it's really funny how the guy playing the Joker is named Mark Hamill. Like that's just a weird coincidence. That must really annoy him. He must get confused for the guy who plays Luke Skywalker all the time.
Whew. And it's the same man, which is it's just surprising. And he's talked about in interviews how like that was actually his kind of goal in getting into the film space, is that he was a big fan of the voice actors of the generation, where he was growing up. That would have been the original run of Looney Tunes, and all of these different things where it's like this really was what he wanted to do, and then he just his career went a different way, but he was able to kind of get back into that space after Star Wars ended for him.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to talk more about Mark Hamill's career and what this movie might mean for his career, because I feel like more than anything, this was sold as the chance to hear one of our great voice actors taking on one of the most iconic voice roles. Like in the world of horror specifically, it's hard for me to think of another famous voice performance that compares to Brad Dourif as Chucky. I'm sure I'm forgetting about something. Obviously, you have great voices in horror,
Right.
Jigsaw, Candyman, but
Freddy Krueger
somebody
in a lot of ways.
yeah, but Brad Dourif specifically brought a character to life just through his voice. Um, and obviously, not to downplay again the puppetry, the animation, all of that amazing work. Because going back to those early Child's Play movies, it's amazing how expressive that Chucky doll actually
Very
is.
much so. Yeah.
Right. So Mark Hamill's involvement was the selling point to me as somebody who definitely wasn't excited for a Child's Play remake and was apprehensive about seeing Chucky be played by a different actor than Brad Dourif. I like to consider myself open minded, but when you have one voice playing the same character across decades at this point, I mean, and still like those Child's Play movies, that original version of Chucky is still going on. I don't know if you watched the Sci-Fi show, but that was announced around the same time as this remake.
It was, and it was interesting because you had these sort of, for a very short period of time, you had this like duel of the horror fans online who were
Yeah.
like, "Let's give Mark Hamill a chance," and "Fuck Mark Hamill, let's stick with Brad Dourif. He's Chucky. That's who should play it." And he had played him in every film that had come out before Child's Play 2018. And it wouldn't be Mark Hamill's first time voicing Chucky, but it would be the first time officially. He did play Chucky for a Robot Chicken episode many years beforehand.
Is that what got
Um,
him the gig?
no, I think it was more so. I think they just thought, if I'm remembering correctly, I feel like they knew of his, profile as a voice actor. It goes far beyond the Joker and Batman the Animated Series. I know that that's the one that he's most famous for. Some people think he has the greatest portrayal of that character. But outside of that, he's got a long career of voice acting and doing things behind the camera as far as that's concerned, in front of a mic. And so I think they just gave him a shot to see what he would do with it. And, whether we liked it or not, we're going to get into throughout the episode. But first off, we talked a little bit about this back in our Child's Play 3 episode. But for those who might be joining us for the first time now, or maybe didn't check that episode out, your personal history with the franchise, is it something that you loved? Are you one of those horror fans that maybe doesn't connect with Child's Play as much? For the uninformed, please inform.
Yeah, I mean, of course, everybody can go back and listen to the episode where I dive into my history with this franchise. But to sum it up briefly, I made the argument that it's possibly the most consistent horror franchise and one that I'm most personally fond of. I mean, I could really see myself popping in almost any of those movies without apprehension. I could see myself marathoning them. I could see myself using this franchise to cheer myself up after a bad day. Even though Chucky isn't exactly my favorite horror icon, I think I'm just so endeared to his character as he evolves, and specifically Brad Dourif's energy. And as the lore continues to expand, the more intrigued I am by the story and saga of Chucky. He's the only slasher villain I can think of to have an arc, or to have you know multiple accruing dimensions without actually losing uh, that that evil energy, that scary or at the very least darkly menacing edge that he's always had. So I'm a I'm a big fan, and I've had to weather a lot of baggage because Child's Play is not a franchise that impresses everyone, as I think you well know. Uh,
Yeah.
and I get it; he's a doll. It's not the most frightening concept on paper, and it's something that this movie had to grapple with in a really awkward way to me because he's not just a doll; he's an animatronic, and for me that just already that kind of exacerbates uh something precarious about this whole setup, and we'll get into that. But yeah, my history, I love those movies. I love their identity, and I was not exactly curious to see somebody else, take it on.
Understandable. I'm unfortunately one of the people who did fall on the other side of that for a long time. Coming into when this remake was coming out, really the only movie that, and this, ooh, this is about to rile up fans because this I don't know if I said this for sure on the other episode, but of course I appreciated the original for what it was. It might not have been my favorite of the big horror franchises at all, but I can appreciate it. There was some craftsmanship that went into it. Tom Holland was awesome. Different Tom Holland for those who don't know who we're talking about. And I appreciated it. But really, the only Child's Play movie that I really enjoyed going into the remake was Curse of Chucky, and so when I saw that they were going to remake it and it was going to have like a sort of like AI robotic, nature to it, I was actually quite excited. I wanted to see what would come of it. And I going into it, I had pretty high expectations for my enjoyment, despite my thoughts on the rest of the franchise. It's not my least favorite. Back on our Child's Play 3 episode, I started the episode as though I was going to say I did not like it. But I ended up turning the corner, and it has it's since topped my list. We'll see if that held together after rewatching this movie. Maybe it moved up, maybe it didn't. I don't know. But I think honestly, maybe we should just start talking about how we feel about this. And I think, if you don't mind, I think for this episode, because, we're revisiting something, a franchise that we talked about before, I think we should go a little throwback for this episode. I think we should kind of talk about the good. We should talk about the bad. We should talk about the ugly. And if you're cool with that, I'd like to hear something that you'd like to check into the good section.
So I always well, I generally think it's a good rule of thumb when you're doing a remake to really reinvent it in some way while still keeping the core concept if you can. But I would still prefer a radical remake versus one that plays it safe. And honestly, on paper, this really does toe the line quite competently. So instead of being possessed by a serial killer, this Chucky doll, in one of the more deliciously wicked pieces of dark humor in the movie, it's reprogrammed by a disgruntled worker of a sweatshop to, you know, uh, go from being this cute, cuddly toy to being an agent of chaos. On paper, that was something that intrigued me. And the thing is that Chucky is such a malevolent character at heart that I really thought it was still a great way to preserve what we love about that character. And I don't want to already spill into the negative, but I can say that I enjoyed the premise on paper, but I don't know if I can say I love the follow through or the execution, you know?
Hmm. Well, I'll go ahead and build off of that because I love the changes that they made to the character, to the lore of what happened to him. The opening of the movie I think is one of my favorites in the franchise. I think it's really well done. I really like the idea of because that's not something that's completely out of the question as far as a disgruntled employee putting something into a device that we're going to be buying. I mean, with this is, something that very much could be a reality as far as, and maybe not to, this extent. Obviously, this is exaggerated for the purposes of the movie, but it's very possible to get a device that's, goes completely haywire or does something that it's not supposed to do. And I like the idea because it does do a good job of saying, hey, here's what the movie used to be. Some people really like it, some people think it's silly. We're gonna bring it into the modern times, the best way that we know how. And for me, that was something that completely worked in this. It's something that I could buy somebody pushing in real life. I could picture some corporation like Apple being like, "Hey, we're gonna make this awesome kids toy that can connect to an iPad or an iPhone," and it's like, oh, like this could be a thing that's done someday. So I really liked the changes that they made to how Chucky,
Mhm.
comes to be and to the lore of, how that happens.
If this were released before Terminator Genesis, I might give it some more points. Man, this to me is like the blue sky beam, right? You know how
Mm,
Hollywood movies all had a giant blue beam
yeah,
shooting up in the sky, Avengers, Suicide Squad, Fantastic Four. Yeah, and AI, I mean, the thing is, there is a rich history of this concept throughout cinema, starting really with Hal in 2001, Space Odyssey.
right.
It's not a cash grab per se. I'm not even saying it rings to me as a cash grab. I don't know. I think what I don't appreciate is the way it strips Chucky of autonomy, or the way it sort of it sort of sands off the edges, because the majority of his screen time is as a doting mechanical creation that it slowly learns to be menacing. It's kind of like uh Arnold in Terminator 2, kind of like there's a little character arc there, which I think I appreciate on paper, but by the time we got to the Chucky that I recognized, it felt a little too late. Maybe that's me coming in with too many of my own expectations, but if I can return it with something good, I do think that the humor we get here, especially from Mark Hamill's deliveries as Chucky, I think it works mostly across the board. I mean, there's stuff that falls flat, especially more character driven stuff. But what can I say? This is for Tupac. That
Well, oh, geez. Well, first
movie,
off,
yeah, it has one line that has always
yeah.
stuck with me. This is for Tupac.
Well, so here's what I can say in regards to something you said before. You know, I think this concept is not foreign to horror, even within the genre, like movies that came out decades before, even something of a different genre. For me, when I watch this, like I can think of two Treehouse of Horror episodes from The Simpsons that are, if you put them together, it is exactly this movie pretty much. There's an episode where their house kind of turns evil and tries to kill them, and there's one where an evil Krusty doll is set to bad and tries to kill them in their home, and it feels like this is a combination of those two concepts. So it's like it's not something foreign to the genre, and of the time, yes, I do believe that there were several movies that had bad tech. Terminator obviously being one of them, dating back all the way, with its concept, but I personally did enjoy that, even though I didn't feel that saturation as much. I avoided those Terminator movies after Salvation. So, but what I will say is this: I did think that as far as the comedy goes, I do think some of it did work. I felt like some of it was pretty ill-timed. I felt like they put some of it into the hands of characters who really shouldn't have had it. In some cases, I don't want to say too much about that yet because I do have a point in the bad for that. But I do think a majority of it did work. When it comes to Mark Hamill's performance and delivery as Chucky, not only with the funny stuff, but like everything. I loved his take on this character. It's a huge selling point for me to get in the well to get it on DVD and watch it, and I did do that. But the biggest thing for me was like just being again. I like the changes that they made to it, and I like the fact that every feeling that you would imagine a person in Chucky's mindset he would be thinking and saying, there's like a level of humanity in what he's saying, despite his robotic nature. So I really enjoyed everything that he delivered, including his comedic stuff. So I'll double down on what you said, and then throw a little bit extra in there.
Well, I'm gonna double up. I think I'm gonna have to scale back the enthusiasm because I didn't love Mark Hamill. I
Ooh,
enjoyed him. I appreciated him. He was funny. I mean, if they were going for, yeah, and they were going for pathos with this dude Chucky,
yeah.
and it's not on his fault. I mean, and this is the problem. How do I say this without just spilling into the bad? I'll elaborate on this point more, but you know, the FaceTime I get with just this doll does not exactly help the mission for me to empathize with it, because it is more plastic than the dated animatronics of the original 80s and 90s Chucky. Like, I could imagine that Chucky eliciting more sympathy from me because I actually see tangible emotion, right, coming
Hmm.
off of that doll. And I don't want to just make this a whole session about, bitching about CGI and lamenting, the state of current affairs. I think we do that enough already. But that's my whole thing with Mark Hamill. I enjoy him. I don't see a real reinvention. He doesn't own this role. Uh,
Wow. Okay.
I don't think he owns it. I think he fills it in. I think he definitely delivers some pretty entertaining material. He drives it home. And look, it's not bad, right? I mean, it just hasn't been something that stuck with me. But at the same time, I think I can say that it's a compliment for me to say that it doesn't offend me, given how wrong it could have gone. Like, I think we have to remember how how much it was a hard sell for people that Brad Dourif was not going to be playing Chucky for the first time.
Very hard sell, especially for people who really did love a majority or all of the Child's Play movies that came before it. Um, I'm gonna challenge you a little bit there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna say that I do think he owned this role. I think, when you look at remakes that took a very, like, sort of wisecracking, like he would taunt you as he killed you type of thing, and you're gonna make it more serious and grounded. There's kind of two examples of that, and I think it's the two examples of remaking a movie where a killer does that, and that's A Nightmare on Elm Street, and that's this. And when you look at those two, in my mind, this is the right way to do it. I felt like I was more emotionally invested in what was happening with Chucky in this movie. His intentions were what got me, and why I felt that sympathy towards this character in some way, because yes, he's doing these terrible things, but he doesn't think he's doing anything wrong. He thinks he's doing everything right. That's just how he's programmed. He considers every action he takes in this is different, has a different intention behind it than what Chucky would have done in the original line of the films, which is he's just an evil serial killer in the body of a doll. In this, he is doing this because he thinks he's doing the right thing. And when Andy is kind of horrified by this and starts to turn against him and starts fighting him, he's confused. He's hurt by it. This bot, this doll, is hurt by the fact that he's doing all of this for Andy, and Andy doesn't appreciate it. He doesn't want to be his friend anymore because of it. So I really liked that angle. I felt like that could have easily gone wrong because of how it could have been very cliche. It could have had a lot of problems, and it could have been executed very poorly. But I think the brutality that they put in this, and the attempt to make the kills good, and everything else around it, really helped elevate that for me.
So let's compare this to Jackie Earle Haley's Freddy Krueger, because that's the comparison to make. And
Yep.
I bet, like you, a lot of people compare this favorably to that, right? I think people consider Jackie Earle Haley a misfire at best as Freddy Krueger, and this is like, yeah, this is how you do it. Even though I don't see Mark Hamill, like, I don't see his name come up as like, oh, actors who reinvented roles or actors
Right.
who,
Yes.
it's still like, hey, you have a bad version and a good version. I kind of want to flip that on its
Oh,
head a
okay.
little. What I at least want to do is defend Jackie Earle Haley and say I kind of wanted an approach more like Jackie's for
Hmm.
reinventing Chucky. Now, look, I'll be honest, I have not seen all of that Nightmare on Elm Street remake because there are other elements about it that keep it from being watchable. Um,
Oh,
not
jeez.
to throw too much shade, but
I can't wait till somebody brings that on this show, dude. I can't wait till you
I
have
want
to
to
watch
talk
that whole
about it.
thing. I'm so
I actually
excited.
think that there. Let me say this: there's a case to be made that that's actually some kind of I don't know, defendable movie. Like there's a case to be made that
I would agree.
it's
There,
got
I
merit.
actually used to enjoy it. So
Mhm. Yeah, that is a conversation for a different podcast, though. But
yeah.
sticking with this comparison, right, Jackie? What he did, I think he grounded Freddy. I think he added something to the role that people didn't like, but he did like instead of being this mythical boogeyman, he was this real life scumbag that you really could imagine like encountering in the real world. You could imagine seeing this guy on the news, and then he becomes Freddy. So they didn't have to do that formula with Chucky, but it's still recognizably Freddy when Jackie does it. Whereas this is, I mean, this is as much Chucky to me as Megan is Chucky. Like two killer dolls, two
Oh.
animatronics, two. I mean, I
Oh.
is that me sounding like a dick? I'm not sure.
No. I don't think so.
I
But
but you see what I'm saying, right?
I but that to me is why I think it works so well because they took that chance with the character to do something different. If they would have tried to make it more recognizable, it would have gone the same way that Jackie Earle Haley's portrayal did, and that was in the can. No, almost nobody likes that. Sure, he at times is people's favorite part of the movie because he's very good in line delivery. He says some really cool stuff. He's definitely the best written character in that movie. But people if they're going to get Freddy Krueger in that form, they want the Freddy Krueger they know. They want him to act the way that Freddy would act. So when he starts doing things differently or when he's not doing those things that you'd expect from the character, it's a disappointment. Whereas in this one, it's going to disappoint you right off the bat if you're going to expect that. And if you can't adapt to that, you're not really going to like the movie, which is why I can sympathize with somebody who does not like this movie or this portrayal. But I think doing something so radically different, but still keeping that same identity of here's this toy that effectively turns evil. Um, I think there's no better way to keep that same principle, but evolve it to change the character enough to have its own identity when you compare it to the rest of the franchise. They gave him a look that's to me is throwing a bone. Hey, it kind of looks like Chucky does. Here you go. Here's for the fans. But it did enough different that I really appreciated it. I really appreciated that I don't have to compare this to Brad Dourif if I don't want to, because it's a different version of that character. Um, I think that's the right way to handle it. Now, to give credit to Jackie Earle Haley, it's really hard to do that with a Freddy Krueger type because there's some real hallmarks of that character. I think ultimately what they could have done right in that movie more so than anything is just get the look right. I think that's something that that portrayal would be looked on at least slightly more favorably if he would have looked better to the audience. But that same sentiment's still there. Some people that fire is not going to hit again. It's not going to be as magical without the person they know and love behind the mask or behind the voice. So take a chance. Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 did that with how they portrayed Michael Myers in that movie. Had to
Which
throw
I
in a
got to
little.
see in glorious 35
Oh
millimeter at the
God,
Row Theater.
I hate you for that. I hate
But
you.
two things. One, I had to leave after 30 minutes because it was my friend's birthday, and it was difficult to tell him that I'm gonna skip your birthday to see Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. As much as I love that movie, and he knows how much I love that movie. Second, it was the theatrical cut. I was
Oh
puzzled by that.
no.
And let me tell you something. I felt like I walked into an alternate dimension. Okay, scenes
Oh,
are just like
yeah.
they removed the meat.
They take out the heart and they give people a more digestible ending who love the Halloween franchise. And oh my God, I don't know how people prefer that version. I will be completely honest with you. I don't get it. It feels neutered, man.
I think I can totally see how like somebody who cannot stand Rob style could prefer that version. I've heard it described as the tolerable version. Okay, but it's the toothless version. It's the defanged version. So,
Right.
anyways, not to bring that back up. I'm not saying Chucky had to get edible. I don't think you have to do something radical. You know what? Let's actually, I think we're only talking about one half of the equation here because Chucky is one half of the equation. Really, he is partners with this version of
Yep.
Andy Barclay, who has been reinvented just as dramatically. He is the product of this generation now. So let's really talk about him because I do think that there is a very interesting dynamic setup, but we will talk about the execution. I think the relationship that he has with Chucky, I think, holds up really well for a good chunk of the movie. It's his relationship with other people, other characters, specifically these friends he makes that left me cold. Right? I saw you rolling your eyes there. I hope that was in agreement with my assessment.
Yeah, we'll have a bad section to air some of those grievances, but what I want to say here is like honestly, before rewatching this movie, I think my favorite version of Andy, which is a hot take in itself, was from Child's Play 3, which we covered on the show. I just really, for some people, I felt like watered down or that he wasn't as important, but I really liked it upon rewatching it after our show. And this to me actually overtook that portrayal for me. This is my favorite version of Andy. I do think that there are moments where it does fail. We'll kind of talk about that because I don't think any of that is Gabriel Bateman's fault. I think he delivered a great performance in this, just like he delivered a great performance in Lights Out, another movie that was a movie, a film director who had only really done short movies before that, getting an opportunity to do something special. Um, this is I really like that dynamic. I talked about how I like Chucky being this sympathetic character, and that doesn't work if Andy also doesn't have qualities that make that not only viable, but that make you feel for him. And he's got the young single mom. He's rough around the edges just like she is, and all of those things combine to make this a portrayal that I really get behind personally.
I think there are just some competing ideas about Andy that cancel each other out for me at times. So he can't be too weird to alienate the kids or the youngsters that are going to see this movie. He's been reinvented to appeal to a new generation, which is cool, but
Yeah.
his whole motivation seems to be that he's driven by social anxiety and a real insecurity about his ability to fit in when he is easily the least quirky, the least neurotic person in this friend group. And I know, I mean, I remember that age, and I remember how scary it was to make like befriend other kids. I think if they had just done a little more work to establish what it is exactly that he has such trouble with connecting to other kids, I think that would have lent a lot more credibility to his relationship with Chucky, because this is one of those movies that just has a big task ahead of itself, which is why would a 10-year-old kid in 2023 play with a doll, play with an action figure, play with a toy of that type? I think the movie it kind of pulls it off, but doesn't do it gracefully. You know what I mean? It's like in that middle ground. Like I accepted it, but there's a real ceiling to the relationships in this movie.
Believe it or not, what something that you said there, despite my feelings on those friend characters, is actually something I took a little bit differently when watching this movie. Actually, both times that I've seen it now. And the big thing is that like I kind of took that as like a very true to life sort of realization, you know, that like he feels that he's so different and that, you know, he doesn't fit in, and so much of that is self-imposed, just like anybody with anxiety, you know, somebody who has right here an anxiety disorder. So much of my problems with it are so self-imposed, and then when he gets out there and he does, you know, make these friends in his building, or you know, they are what they are. But you know what I appreciated about that was that he kind of has this realization of like, oh, maybe, you know, I'm not so, you know, fucked up after all. I can make friends, you know, and these are my friends now. So I kind of appreciated that angle, despite the fact that I don't think a lot of the stuff with the friends works. There's a premise there that helped me buy that relationship with Chucky that much more, especially with, you know, the single mom angle is really cool. Aubrey Plaza, I'll talk about her in a little bit because I do think there are good and bad things about her being in this. But I like the fact that he has you know, a young single mom in his life, you know, somebody who had to work a lot while he was growing up, and somebody who, you know, was basically growing up with him in some ways. I like that he
Yeah.
is. I like that angle. It makes me buy the Chucky stuff more
Look, I like
personally.
Aubrey Plaza, and I like the sense of humor she brings to this movie. When I was speaking to the movie sense of humor, how it mostly landed, I mean that includes her, but I never really bought that this was a mother and son.
No, and I didn't want to get into the negatives too heavily, but I guess it's
Oh,
not
I
super
do. I'm a
negative.
negative Nelly. Let's go. Let's do it.
Well,
Um,
yeah, fuck it. Let's get there. I mean, we could still talk about good once we're in the bed, you know, if they
yeah,
come
I
up.
know I
So
said that we should go back to the good, bad, and the ugly structure, and then I'm changing my mind now. It's a free for all
yeah, let's just
again.
throw it out. Yeah, let's just
Yeah,
throw it out. You know, the
let's just throw it
conversation's
out
flowing that way, so we'll just throw it out. And by the way, in
because,
the in the framework of the episode, I was actually the one who presented that idea,
yeah,
but you know, that's all
the
right.
thing about this movie and what I'm realizing is so much of what I have to say is that I like something on paper, or I think that they did a respectable job, but I notice it coming up short, right? And a great example of this is I was really invested in Andy's relationship with this new take on that detective character played
Yeah.
now by Brian Tyree Henry. Just what a great reinvention of that character. I mean, I thought it was cool that they were actually honoring the source material so closely that they are actually bringing in these side characters. I do really enjoy all of the performances in the original, and I felt like it was a really interesting thing to see this movie just completely reinvent all these pieces, but still play the same game. And Brian Tyree Henry, honestly, he might get my favorite performance in the movie. I just love that guy.
Ooh.
I love his swagger. I think he's like got this really cool, low key sense of humor that really contrasts nicely with Aubrey Plaza. I thought they should have had like a real relationship. He should have really had a relationship more thoroughly with these main players, but it always just felt like he was kept at a distance the whole way through. I guess because he has to be the cop.
Yeah.
You know, he's more of like a tool for suspense, but it's like they didn't know the kind of magic they were working with. You know, it was a bit of a shame.
I agree on that. Before I get to that, I will say, as far as Aubrey goes, I do think that overall, that what I put down for her is that she is more of a distraction for me than anything. Like I know who she is, I know what she's capable of comedically. I do not buy her as the mom character in this. You know, I do think that again, sort of what you've been echoing about different parts of the movie that I've been buying so far. This is where I sort of am on that, you know, side of where here's something that is a great idea on paper. I think comedic actors when they go into the horror genre, a lot of times for me, it's ended up working. I really did not like the Last House on the Left remake. I infamously watched that movie one time, said I'll never watch this again, and I sold the copy that I had, so I didn't even want to own it anymore. I still own Mama, to give you an idea of that. But no, I think Aubrey brought something to this role that I think, like, her heart and her performance, I think were very good, but I didn't buy her in the role. I don't even think it was her fault. I just think it was a miscasting. And it distracted me throughout the movie. But on the flip side, uh dude, I think David Tyree Henry, man, like I might agree with you. I think he has a lot of heart in his role. There are some moments where it's a little awkward. So
Yes. Yeah, I
that
just think
does come into
this
play.
script is like riddled with kind of awkward contrivances. I mean, some really funny ones, some
Yeah.
really like some of the awkwardness lands, but uh like his whole introduction, with Andy, like just
Yeah.
that little bit they get into and the back and forth.
Yeah.
He's the hallway cop. Um,
Yeah.
I think this is a movie that had a personality that was really trying to escape, but this isn't a vehicle for any of that. It's just the new Child's Play remake. I'm grateful that we got the little sparkles of humor that we did get, considering how it's a departure from the original version, for sure.
Yeah.
Here's the question you always got to ask with a remake: what if this wasn't a remake? What if this was, um, like Megan, its own thing, right? Uh, I think I would like this movie a little more. I'll be honest, because I would see those moments of personality and not. I would just be grateful to have that. I would not be comparing it to anything that came before it. I would just be grateful that, like Megan, a movie that isn't perfect, but it did have some chemistry with its cast, and it certainly had a force of personality. This could have cranked up the personality.
I'll disagree with you in the sense of, I think I was finding myself not really making comparisons. The first time I watched it, I started off being like, oh, that's a lot different than Brad Dourif would have done it, or oh, that's an interesting thing. But as the movie went on, I just started to forget. I was just like, I was watching what this movie was giving me. I was enjoying it. There were parts that I wasn't enjoying, and I took it for what it was. So I think if this was another movie, to me, this accomplished what a remake should, which is like, if you take out the elements of what the original franchise was, or the callbacks, or all of those things, and you just let this movie stand on its own, would it still hold up? And I think Rob Zombie's Halloween movies do a good job of that. I think this movie does a good job of that. I think there's a lot of remakes that would fall into that.
I honestly
And
think the Last House on the Left is like an example of something that got it right this
most
time.
people love that movie. I think for me, it wasn't even the sense of like I thought it was a bad movie. I use it as an example because there are quite a few actors in that movie who are more known for their comedic parts than their more serious roles. Especially on the killer side, I believe two of them are like career comedians.
One of them, I mean, you got Jesse Pinkman, you got
Yeah,
the kid from Unbreakable, and then you have character actor uh, Garrett Dillahunt, I believe his name is.
yeah.
He's been in things like No Country for Old Men, and that's his only kind of like really prominent role that I'm aware of. But in that one role, honestly, he really impressed me. Uh, and he reinvented that character. Not that like Krug is like a super iconic character. Like
Right.
it's not like you're gonna play Norman Bates, but um, considering it is a reinvention, considering that he could have done what the last guy did, David Hess. I admire that reinvention. I think I put that in the category of a success and not a miss. And I'm not putting this as a miss, by the way. I hope that
Right.
I've made that clear. It's not a miss. I think Mark Hamill as Chucky just should have been something that really took the bull by the horns.
So like maybe you expected a home run, but you got a single, maybe a double.
Something like that. I feel like it was just unambitious. I think that's probably what I'm the
Oh,
best
okay.
way to say it. I think it was just I mean, just the voice that he actually came up with for Chucky. I mean, it's not that different than I think how Mark Hamill just sounds in interviews.
I Here's where we go again. Like maybe it's not too different, but again, I really enjoyed it. I loved the take. I don't even know how much more I could say about the actual take of Chucky, because like almost anything you can bring up about what they changed between him and Brad Dourif, I am pretty much fully behind. So it's gonna be hard to find something where I'm not, and the voice is one of them. Look, it adds to I think it adds a lot to certain scenes. I think his humor is a very different style of humor than what Brad Dourif does. It's and as far
It's
as
entirely
his
different.
yeah, exactly, and as far as his like very heartfelt scenes, yeah, I think that's where he really shined. I think where he's delivering these lines of like I might like for me, and I don't know if anybody's going to be able to relate to this, but there were several times in this movie where I was like, man, I feel like I'm sympathizing more for this like killer robot than I am some of these other characters that are getting murdered by him. And it was just one of those things that like I was fully behind it. And I think I was skeptical right
Mhm.
before the movie came out. I had seen the look, and I was mixed on it before watching it. I was
Yeah,
like,
we haven't really
eh.
talked about the look yet, of course.
Yeah, and that's something that I'm interested in getting to. In fact, right after this, we can get into it. I just the thing that I think I started to doubt myself before going into this, and I was really surprised by his performance. I still have very high expectations for the movie that they had to live up to, but his performance, I think, was exactly what this movie needed to be different and to still stand on its own. But the look is something that people are really going to either hate or love. Some people will fall in the middle. I think that will be rarer in a lot of cases. I've seen a lot more negative on this than I have seen positive. And I would like to ask you first, overall, obviously the shot behind you is part of this consideration, but overall, what are your thoughts on the redesign of the doll?
That it looks like a bitch. All right. This is a beta take. All right.
Are you red pilling Chucky?
Brad Dourif was a Chad, and this is oh wait, no, Brad Dourif was a Sigma. Yeah, he was a Sigma.
Oh Jesus. Oh
And you know
God.
what? Let's like put something in perspective. Okay, he's not toxic. He is evil, but he is not toxic. One of my favorite jokes in all of Chuckydom is in the first season of that Chucky show where he's talking to the protagonist who's a gay kid, and Chucky's like, I that stuff doesn't phase me. My kid's gender fluid. And the kid says, and you're okay with that? And Chucky says, yeah, I'm not a monster.
I did see that clip. I did appreciate that. That was funny.
And that's just a kind of personality that you're not gonna hit lightning in a bottle twice. Like Brett, I mean, honestly, Mark Hamill could be uh committing to this 100%. He could be doing something revolutionary. But if that's what I do compare it to, yeah, it does fall flat because we have seen this story arc of the sad robot, the bad programming. I mean, I mentioned one of the most iconic examples, Hal from 2001: A Space Odyssey, and I just feel like this thing was destined to be like the Z grade version of something. You know, there was not enough of an original DNA to this reiteration, which makes it sound like I'm down on this movie. I'm really not down on it. It's just very hard for me to even form like a strong opinion based on the finished product.
Interesting. I'll say the redesign for me, the first thing I thought when that first image came out was like, oh, they're going like a small soldiers route. Like I thought it was very like the pronounced facial features and such. It was just very
Wow, what a
much
great
along.
sign that a movie from 2019 was evoking small
Well,
soldiers.
but I like small soldiers quite a bit, and so I was excited. Ultimately, like I was very hesitant when I saw the look, though. I was like, I don't, I'm not really behind this. Um, Watching the movie was a little eye opening because I felt like there were really interesting like angles to the curvature and such. When you light it differently, it looked different. There was ways to play around with it that I think was sort of limited with the original design of Chucky. I do think the original design of Chucky is a better design. It just makes more sense for an evil, toy. But I think this design truthfully fits the version of the character that they're going for. This is supposed to be a very unassuming. Even when he is murderous, he's not doing so with bad intentions. So he's not really like an evil robot per se. Like he is, but he isn't. In his mind, he's not an evil robot. So I thought the look complemented that sort of sentiment well. But there were times where even I had to say like, okay, that looks a little silly, or that looks a little stupid, or this is getting like uncanny valley. But yeah,
Did
I
you
think
ever
overall
take
I
this
gave it a
doll
thumbs up.
seriously? Did I mean
Yeah, I did.
okay. Was
Through
he
several parts.
was he
Yeah.
scary? Do you see this in your nightmares?
No, well, this concept as a whole is not very scary to me. I will say though that if we're comparing it to the rest of the movies, I do think that some of the portrayal in this is a little bit um more menacing as far as like actual threat than Chucky would be. He
No.
to me he feels more. He feels more. First of all, he
Okay.
feels more like a threat because he thinks he's doing the right thing. But on the other side of
I
that, he, I don't know, man. I buy it more.
I understand that he has magic drone powers and that he can turn up the thermostat really high. So that's some scary shit, man.
Oh my
I'm not
god.
I'm not going to downplay that, but I mean, I understand what you mean. It is that difference of Jason to Uber Jason. Yeah, Uber
Right.
Jason is decked out. He is an upgrade on paper, but the actual cinematic quality, the impact that it has on my viewing experience isn't one of terror. It just feeds into this. I think something I brought up in our Child's Play 3 discussion is something that I always love about Chucky is that because he is a doll, because he's so small, the writers have to get really creative and have to make him a really inventive killer in order to actually make this work, and to make this a slasher movie where our killer is a doll with menace. And I think for the most part they always succeeded in that.
Hmm.
Chucky was clever, he was patient, he knew how to manipulate situations. One of my favorite examples, he switches out the bullets in Child's Play 3 with real bullets, and people will bitch about how that's not how that would work. Okay. Okay. All right.
I'm not here for that.
Yeah. None of us are here for that. Now that's ingenuity. What is not, what does not represent ingenuity at all to me is Chucky turning up the thermostat to a pipe so that this creepy landlord, who I thought was Jack Black for a long time in the movie, um, I don't know, falls onto a shredder or is some kind of contrivance. It was like almost like a Rube Goldberg machine.
Honestly though, like that, I liked that about this. That was one of my biggest issues with the original like franchise and the original series was like, yeah, there were times where they got creative. Honestly, I think Child's Play 3 does that the best of all of them. And um with several of the kills that happened in that movie, never did I think like, oh, this is too much. I can't by this character doing this. At the end of the day, this is a normal doll in the original Child's Play, just a regular everyday child's doll that an evil man's body is, or an evil man's consciousness is now inside of. And I always found it to be somewhat laughable during the scenes where like he's overpowering full-grown human beings, or where he's, like he just seems so powerful, and like sometimes that's like immediately thrown out, where somebody will pick him up and throw him or something like that. Like that's what you should be doing. But I felt like the original movies, if they did get creative with their kills, it was in a movie I didn't really enjoy, like some of the later ones. Or if it was, I didn't buy everything in those movies. I appreciated when they did it, which is why I think Child's Play 3 has quickly become, a favorite of mine. But at the end of the day, I appreciated this one more because it didn't feel like they were completely insulting that side of my brain that says like, this doll's not going to be overpowering grown human beings, and if it is, I definitely buy a robot doing that more than a stuffed good guy doll. So I felt like it had a little bit more room to do creative things, but it still felt like they weren't
Yeah.
abandoning the kill side of things.
I just like my killer dolls to be analog. Right?
That's fair.
Okay. This is not a vinyl edition. This is some iCloud type of monstrosity, and call me old fashioned. I mean, and the other thing is like Megan really stole this movie's thunder, uh, which is not really fair because Megan came out well after this movie did, like a 3-4 year gap. Um, but instead of being accused of ripping off this movie, Megan was seen as like kind of like perfecting this movie.
I haven't seen Megan, so I don't know.
It's fun.
I heard it. I
It's worth
heard
a
it was
watch.
fun.
Yeah.
I heard it was very fun. I was interested in seeing it when it just never got around to it. Like many things in movies, I just haven't gotten around to it. But maybe my opinion will change when I watch Megan. But I like what they gave us with it here. I think it was creative enough. I do think there are times where it was a little simplified. I think that kill that you talked about there was, maybe a little complicated, but I like to see the character, get creative and try to do something different with the kills. So, yeah, I think you could go either way with that.
Mhm.
Ultimately too, I think some of what Chucky does in this movie is, going to play on people who are fans of the franchise. Maybe people don't like that approach to the kills because of how much they like the original movies, or maybe they don't like it because they're so distracted by how he looks. I've heard people say that.
It's just something that doesn't come quite together. Yeah, we should talk more in depth about the kills because it's a slasher movie, right?
Yeah.
It's a horror movie, and this movie it doesn't quite
Oh,
get there to the
really?
land of Carnage Candy. Right, there's some cool like After Effects shots, and there's a hilarious gag where they're trying to find out what to do with the severed head of this one. What was it? Some like random lady? Was it Brian Tyree Henry's grandma, or what was the gag there?
Yeah, it could. I think so. For some reason, that scene doesn't stick with me as much, so I don't recall who it was.
Well,
But
now you know
yes.
how I feel about this whole movie. But
Oh.
uh sorry, shots fired.
Yeah. Pew.
I
Right in the
think
heart.
I think the whole tech AI angle honestly is doing more damage to my relationship with this movie than I probably realized at first.
Ooh.
I don't know. I think it does put up some kind of a wall between me and the action, because it just is like way too much of a simple answer. I think when you give a character that kind of omnipotence, it's just not. You know what it is? It's very similar to what's going on in the original run of Chucky movies slash TV show slash what the current state of that original timeline, because they're giving Chucky these new powers that are making him like this all powerful being. He can possess multiple things at once, uh, people, objects. He has created a whole army of Chucky dolls. He's passing around his spirit like and spreading it around like COVID to where he could potentially possess the entire population. And for some people, that raises the stakes. But just like how I don't want my heroes to be overpowered, I don't really want my villains to be overpowered, because that just sort of deflates the tension before it begins. And I think that's what I'm bumping up against with this new version of Chucky. Can I tell you my favorite kill though?
I'd love to hear
Is
it.
is the kill before all of this AI stuff really takes off. It's when he kills that piece of shit who has a secret family, um, even though he's hooking up with Aubrey Plaza on the side.
Taking down the Christmas lights.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's just the best. It's the best one.
Yeah.
I mean, by far. I will say, our friend of the show, Cody Leach, I do believe in his review. It's been a long time since I watched it. I think, maybe a couple years, but I do believe he did say this movie was Carnage Candy. So I think he'd be on the opposite side of that argument with you. I think I am too. I really do love what they give us with the kills here, but that one just goes above and beyond for me. But it does something more than just a kill. Like, I think it shows how good the cinematography can be at times in this movie. It's shot very well. It looks very good. It's designed very well. Everything about it just works for me. And it's honestly one of my favorite kills in the entire franchise, if I'm being honest.
Now, this movie doesn't have any of my favorite blank in
I
the entire
understand.
franchise.
Completely understandable.
You could make the case that some of the performances, they get up there. They get up there. If the leash were taken off, if I felt like this was the actor's movie to own, I could see that really taking off. I think I'm just going to keep going back to the same thing. And then I hope I'm not just sounding like a broken record, but there's not a core concept here for me in terms of like the movie's identity.
I don't know. I don't know that I agree, man. I think that this movie does a good job of establishing itself and not only presenting ideas that are different. That's something that's really important when you have a remake, in my mind, or even like a requel or a reimagining or whatever you want to say it. You have to present something that will allow the movie to stand on its own, or else people are going to bury it. And people are going to bury it if you don't do it right,
Do you
or
think it
if they don't
stands on its
appreciate
own?
it. I do. I truly do. I think it does. I think you could have made this movie without a Child's Play branding, without Chucky, and I would have appreciated it just as much. And I think, a lot of. I don't know that I might appreciate it slightly less, just because I like the fact that they're innovating in a franchise that I didn't. It was making me feel a way about a franchise that I overall didn't feel about it. And at the time when I
Well,
watched
the
it, this
interesting
time it's
thing
different.
is, I do think this movie needs the precedent of having an original movie to base itself off of, to explain some of the plot directions and character directions, because we do have a dated concept, a boy playing with a doll.
Yeah.
And I don't see why people want to go see that movie and not the killer Polaroid movie, or the killer, uh, you know, the killer blank of the week movie. I don't see how that
Right.
stands out, how this stands out in that field, without that push of being IP, right?
You could argue, though, that Megan is an example of one that did do that. I mean, like, at the end of the day, this is a movie that took that concept of a kid playing with toys. It made it a more believable thing. Whether or not you completely bought it, that's going to be based on your experiences and what you think about the movie as a whole. But I think it's there, man. I
See,
think that core is there.
I think Megan is why I'm being so hard on this movie, because I've seen what I'm talking about done to the extent that I'm talking about. Like, Megan was iconic before the movie came out. There
That
were
is fair.
TikToks galore, recreating everything that people
The
could parse out
dance
of that
and
trailer.
yeah.
The
Mhm.
dance, the look. Uh, I mean, without seeing the movie, I could have quoted it, and that is just there's no ingredient here that is going to capture the zeitgeist, and it doesn't have to. It doesn't have to. But Chucky, Child's Play. Sorry, I have a bad habit of calling these movies just Chucky.
I understand. Yeah.
Yeah, Child's Play 2019 is caught between a rock and a hard place, and that rock is the original Child's Play, and that hard place is Megan.
Well, I think it's also important context, and to be fair to the movie, that they didn't have Megan as a goalpost.
No, no,
I
it did
think,
not.
and let's be fair to this movie and to Megan,
No,
that Megan sort of struck fire. Like
it
it
did.
really was one of those things that that could have easily been a movie that was clowned on, that was a mega failure, that nobody cared about and nobody went to see. And you have to give props to their marketing department because they were smart enough to know that we have to push this movie as what it is, and that it is a silly concept, and let's make the trailer fun, and let's show people that they can have fun watching this. And as somebody who hasn't seen it, I can't say that that that's an experience that everybody would have, but based on everybody that I've talked to, I haven't talked to a single person that didn't have fun watching it. I'll say about this movie, I will give it some credit because even though it does feel like we might be missing some things, it is a very short watch. It's like what, an hour and a half. It's not a difficult movie to sit through. At least for me, it wasn't. It
It's
felt like it
watchable.
flies by.
Oh, it's watchable.
There are. I think it was smart not making this like a 2.5 hour movie. um, but I'll say that I want to ask you: do you think that the length being a more watchable length does work for the movie, or does that work against it for you? That you're losing some of that maybe extra meat that it would have.
What? No, the problem is it's rotting meat. Okay, there's meat here. It's
Damn.
just turning green. No, that was mean. I'm so tempted to come up with zingers, and that's why, like, you read some reviews and you're like, damn, you really got that riled up about that movie. Usually it's because whoever was writing it they were really impressing themselves with how many savage takedowns they could come up with. This is not a movie to get caustic about. I think, I guess it's an interesting question that you asked. I wanted to see just a set of different priorities. I wanted to know less about how Chucky worked and all of the killer apps that he had, and I think I really wanted to see screen time devoted to the relationships. I think the only relationship that gets the proper amount of screen time is Chucky and Andy. But let me tell you something. Let me tell you something. When those friends get introduced,
Oh,
it's a
we
bigger
haven't gotten
problem
to the
than you would
friends.
it's a bigger problem than you would think at first, because, like, whatever, they're mediocre side characters, but they really steal focus away from that relationship between Chucky and Andy. I think is something that I was encountering. And I get what they were doing. They wanted Chucky to be jealous that Andy was making friends, but I thought it would have been more interesting to really keep that tension confined to that relationship more than make Chucky into something of an afterthought. He just doesn't. I don't know. I mean, let me ask you if you see what I'm saying, because I'm trying to explain why this movie just isn't quite landing.
I don't know that I'll be able to make that point because I don't necessarily agree with that point. But what I will say about the Friends is that they actually hurt this movie for me. And I think the big thing is that it feels like part of the intention of including them is missing from this, because when you watch this, it feels like they're setting it up to be a very I'll say maybe like use the characters similar to like how it in 2017 did it. Like that movie was very inspired by the success of Stranger Things. And I think this movie was they had the idea of being inspired by Stranger Things and having this group of kids be the ones that fight Chucky instead of the one kid. But they fail to give you a reason to care about any of the other characters. They fail to cast the right and I feel bad, talking about like these are kids, but like they didn't really land
They know
performance
what
wise.
they're getting into, Connor. Say it.
They just didn't really land performance wise for me. I think they were written really poorly. And I think, honestly, the best way to utilize those friends in that jealousy angle is by just giving us one
What
They
are
could
the
have done it in one
friends?
scene. No, just like they could have accomplished this in one scene that was just written competently of Andy realizing like, hey, at the end of the day, maybe I'm the one holding myself back. Maybe I can make friends. Maybe I'm not too weird. Like I can do this. And then Chucky seeing that he's realized this and going into that desperation mode, it could have been all that they needed. But they gave us
Uh-huh.
so much more of these characters that we already didn't need too much of to begin with, and that weren't written
Okay.
well enough.
Have you ever seen The Cable Guy?
Of course, yes.
Uh,
I never would have expected the cable guy to come up during
no,
this.
isn't it a perfect analogy? Because that is to me one of the um, great movies on this topic of the unstable, clingy weirdo.
Yeah, I'll say so.
And look, I'm not. This movie didn't have to be Chucky meets the Cable Guy, but what I'm realizing about that is just how much time is devoted to the principal characters in the Cable Guy and how focused that movie is. Like it does not get distracted. It does not lose focus on the fact that we have two characters, Matthew Broderick and Jim Carrey, and Leslie Mann is very wisely used as yes, that character who's going to ultimately really complicate things and form this triangle. And there's like a whole history with Matthew Broderick and Leslie Mann that you can believe. And I don't know, it's just it's a tight movie. And I'm contrasting that with Child's Play because I realize how scattered it really is. I mean, we have a couple of different threads that could be uh, the thing that starts really uh, providing the tension, bringing out the tension. You know, it could have been Aubrey Plaza. It could have been Brian Tyree Henry. You could have turned all of that friend group into one character that we could have actually gotten to know and really seen a believable friendship with Andy forming. But ironically, the only person who Andy has a believable relationship with in this movie is Chucky. So that's the weird thing. It's like Andy has abandoned Chucky for characters that I don't see how he could get invested in that relationship versus what he has with Chucky.
I'm gonna agree with some of that, but I'm also gonna contrast it a little bit. And what I mean by that is that I do agree with you somewhat as far as like, but I think where I'm gonna disagree a little bit is I'm just gonna say that I do think, despite the fact that I don't buy Aubrey in the role, I do appreciate the route that they took with her character and some of the decisions that she was making, and the things that we did get from her with her relationship with Andy. Same thing with David Tyree Henry. I really enjoyed their dynamic, and I really thought that that was a good way to do it. I think where the friends disappoint me the most is that I felt like those other two relationships were we were shining enough light on them to buy that this could be the thread that unravels the psyche of Chucky. Um, and then you have these friends that could have been the perfect triad in a way, of like, who's going to be the one to set it off, who's going to be the one to finally do it. And they were just so poorly executed that it didn't come across like you're sort of surprised, like this is what is going to break him. Like I like what's going to come after, and I do enjoy what comes after, but like I they're just so weak. Like they're not funny. They're not doing
I
anything.
think the reason
So
they're so weak, though, is the product of the fact that they don't need to be here. They're completely superfluous elements. I
yeah,
actually think you could just take them out. Because what
yeah,
really drives the tension between Andy and Chucky? It's when Chucky gets inspired by the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2,
yes.
in one of my favorite scenes. That was a good touch.
Whew.
And then it's really driven home when he murders the cheating asshole boyfriend. I think you can remove any third party from the equation here. I think you already have what could be the makings of like a perfectly believable um, um, friendship turned enemy situation.
I'm gonna say I think honestly I would have rather seen the route that you presented, which is that you take the characters and you put them into one, and you give us one person who we can buy the relationship, and we can know more about that person and connect with them a little bit more instead of just a couple of friends that we really don't know, we don't have a reason to care about, and maybe they add a little bit
And
to
are not
the.
likable. Like, I
No, they're
think
not
I
exactly.
was endeared against these characters. They reminded me way too much of these really snarky kids I knew growing up. The type of kids that, they thought it was funny to call other people by the wrong name and
Yeah.
things like that. I think we all knew those kids. So it's almost like when you watch a rom-com and like the girl goes with the asshole boyfriend and you're shouting at the screen, "Don't go back to the asshole boyfriend. Chucky's right there." And Chucky, for the most part, doesn't do anything wrong.
He certainly doesn't think he's doing anything wrong.
No, obviously I'm being facetious. I mean, that is the most interesting idea here. I think we finally kind of come upon the problem for me is just how unfocused this movie is, and it spends its energy on five story elements that should have been like two or three.
Ooh. I'll say the amount of focus that they put on them did detract for me, but it was really just the friends. I thought the core, what they really try to drive home most in this movie is the relationship between Andy and Chucky, and I think they accomplished that. And in that sense, I can't really say that this movie's too scattered. I think it does begin to unravel a little bit more when you introduce those friend characters. So I can certainly sympathize with your sentiment there, but I don't see that side honestly. Like when they started exploring that relationship between Andy and Chucky, and it was more in depth and it was different and it felt fresh to me. I was behind it, and I felt like they put more focus on that than they did anything else. And you could make the argument that that hurt a little bit because maybe we did want a little bit more with David Tyree Henry, maybe we wanted a little bit more with Aubrey Plaza, but um I thought they balanced that part well. I think where the balance was kind of tipped was when those friend characters came in. I think that did hurt the movie, especially at a pretty critical point where we're supposed to. This is the turn. This is where we're going.
Mhm.
We're never coming back from this, and it just felt like
Yeah,
that part was executed pretty poorly. They had to have done something with the rest of the movie that you know that that drove it home for me in order for me to come away from this saying that I had a good time.
I'll just say that these friend characters to me are symptomatic of the problem of the movie, which is a lack of focus and a lack of identity. Look, you don't think everybody knew what these friends were supposed to do, what they were supposed to be? Stranger Things had come out like just like a year or two before. Like, don't insult my intelligence, movie.
I mean, yeah, no, I think it was a complete mistake, and I think whereas you can look at and I've gone on record in saying I prefer the original It miniseries to the the reimagining in
Mhm.
2017. However, I do think that is a movie that took the inspiration of Stranger Things and used it to its strengths. I think this is one of those examples of it being forced. Whereas you have this core of multiple characters that you can buy coming together and having this sort of Stranger Things Bond vibe in it. You don't have that in Child's Play. The core is Andy and Chucky, really. I mean, and Andy's mom, and there's other characters that are in there as well. But the core is Andy and Chucky, and especially in this movie, that is the core that they establish. So creating this third act around the fact that we are going to have multiple kids when we really don't know anything about these other kids that are helping, we don't know anything. We don't have a reason to care about them. We don't have a reason to care if they live or die. I mean, other than the fact that you don't want to see a kid die, but like, they're already kind of obnoxious and they're already doing these
Yeah,
things that aren't endearing them to you. So it's like, again, that part I will ask, like, who was that truly for, and who did they really think that they were executing that well enough to make up for the fact that they
they
forced it in there?
they were making a grab for the Stranger Things crowd.
Oh, they were, but It's like what point do you realize that like you can't force something? Like was that a studio note? Was that in the earlier drafts of the script? Is this a director move? Like I don't know the answer to that. All I can say is that whichever direction it came from, it was the wrong decision.
Yeah.
And it didn't completely take me away from the movie, but it's a big downer.
I do think you are scapegoating these kids though. I mean, these kids wouldn't it wouldn't be as bad if the rest of the movie was solid. Like usually you can isolate a lackluster performance or a like I've plenty of movies that I love have mediocre side characters. It's like it's not something that should be glaring, but like you start pulling at this thread, and I feel like, to quote Rivers Cuomo, that's how you undo the sweater.
But I see that's where I think we differ as far as our opinions on this movie, because like I thought the rest of the movie was solid. I was buying into everything else that we were seeing, and it was at that point that was the first moment in the movie, the first true moment that I saw something that I was like, this is taking away from my enjoyment of the movie. It was the first thing that happened in the entire runtime that I said, now I have a problem, a
Okay,
major problem.
yeah, we have a clear division here.
Yeah.
It's interesting that we found something that we agree on is a problem, at least, but
Yeah.
what that problem represents, I don't know. It's interesting, right?
Yeah, I mean, we can. This it's weird to have something that we are both in agreement on, in a sense that
Mhm.
we have such a different take and interpretation on. You know,
I,
it's
I-
but it speaks
hey,
to how we feel about the movie.
yeah, no, if the movie hooked me the way it did you, I mean, it's not really something I would spend a lot of energy on, but here we are. I think we've isolated every element of the movie, I think, that we can dissect. Am I missing anything?
The one thing I wanted to throw in there that I think this movie does better than the other Child's Play films, and maybe this will catch some heat, but Child's Play is one of those franchises that it's like really one of the only ones that doesn't have much of an identity in its score, and I think this movie has a very good score.
I
Um,
can't remember the score.
Oh, see, like that was something that I took away from this. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was the only film of the series that really like gave us a unique identity that you can say is like tied to a movie or a franchise. Where Halloween has like its, scores and cues and all those things that you recognize. And Scream has some of that, and Nightmare on Elm Street certainly has that. Friday the 13th certainly has that. And so it's cool to see a Child's Play film, at least in my mind, try to do that.
Well, I know
So
the roles have been reversed here because I'm usually the guy who's like, "What about the score, though?"
yeah, that is
Yeah.
weird because in well, I think though that the roles are reversed in a sense where we're on different sides of that, but I do think that as far as the roles that we're playing in this episode, like it's very much the same. Usually, I'm on that side if I'm not really connecting with a movie. I don't really notice the score as much, whereas you're connecting with it. I think we're playing the same. We're playing the opposite role
Well,
here,
to me,
but
the score fits in with everything else. You mentioned the cinematography and other aspects of the production. It's a slick movie. I
yeah.
mean, I'll compare it to the It reboot movies. Very slick production.
Mhm.
Cannot fault the production. I do think the direction was a little shaky. I feel like scenes were not constructed very robustly. I feel like I was just questioning the pacing of some of the edits, and like, is this the best place to put the camera? I had a few of those moments, but I mean, it's a well produced movie. And I'm just going to put that score into that category of slick, admirable, respectable, but not, I mean, even on for this podcast, I can't really recall it. I will challenge you though, because the fan favorite score of the franchise is Child's Play 2.
Yeah, but I do believe so. I would say I enjoy this more.
Okay. It probably has um more appeal to it, as it has more appeal sonically, just as a piece of music,
Yeah,
isolated from its mission to augment the movie that it's paired with. I think the Child's Play 2 thing, I don't listen to that soundtrack
right.
outside of watching the movie, but I can feel the movie being enhanced uh, by the soundtrack or by the score.
Actually how I felt about this one. You're not gonna. I have many movie scores on my phone. To listen to while I'm driving or whatever else. This is not one that you're gonna see there, but I did feel that it enhanced my experience with the movie, and it stood out in a franchise where not many of them did for me. So. Yeah, that's. I mean, that's gonna wrap it up for me here. And if that wraps it up for you, I'd love to hear. Since I did bring this film here, I'd love to hear kind of your final thoughts and final verdict on this one. If you got nothing else, always a good sign.
I do have to ask because I didn't really get a chance to look at people's reactions. Why don't people like this movie? Because I had heard mostly positive things. By the time I went to the theater, I felt like I was the odd one out, not enjoying it that much.
Yeah, so people. So there's some of the stuff that you'd expect. It's not the original movie, which I think a lot of people had problems with. It's not the Chucky they know and love. They don't have any interest in seeing this version of the character. They don't like the design of the character. They think everybody around Chucky is a worse version of something we've seen before, or a new version of something they don't want to see at all. I think a big complaint that people had who are a little disconnected was some of the pacing. I think people felt like this movie felt. I saw a lot of things where they said it was rushed, or it felt rushed.
Yeah, I can see that for
Um,
sure. I don't think it's
which
a screen time thing. I think it's what we're talking about. I think the focus is just fractured among all of these different threads.
yeah, I think some of the people too felt like there were elements of the movie that they were excited for that they didn't feel the movie capitalized on. Some people were complaining about how Mark Hamill was used. A lot of people had a problem with how Aubrey Plaza was used. I guess she is. I knew I was always a fan of her, but I guess I didn't realize the cult that she had behind her, of people who said she deserved much better than this movie. There was a lot of things that I saw. Honestly, though, like a lot of the negative reviews that I read for this, at least from Letterboxd, which by the way, I did not say at the opening of the episode, this does sit at a 2.6 out of 5 on Letterboxd, which is a
That is
surprisingly
low.
it's
That is pretty
surprisingly low
low.
score.
Yeah.
So I think what it comes down to is, most of the people that really hate this movie are people who wanted a Child's Play film in the classic sense and didn't get it, and are now loving the television show, but skip this one as a rewatch.
Yeah, I think the thing about Chucky is he has had the ability to be a little bit more of a force of personality. That's why we love Chucky. We don't love him because he wears a really cool mask or he has a cool
Right.
weapon or he has a cool power. It's
Right.
literally just the presence and the personality and the wit of that killer doll. So the mission just seemed really stacked against the directors in terms of we're going to take the name of Chucky and we're going to reinvent that character and make it our own. Like I don't envy anybody's task there.
Yeah.
I might even say it was ill-advised, although I can't imagine an alternate universe where Mark Hamill like really makes the role his own and it's its own thing, which is this movie kind of is. But I guess this is a good time for final verdicts. No,
Yeah.
so if I can just sort of transition there because we're really touching on all of the problems. This movie is trying to reinvent a character who's a classic in my mind and does not offer a compelling alternative to the brand of Chucky that got me in the theater to watch this film. I don't resent this movie. I don't hate it. I wish everybody involved in the production of this the best. There was no ill will to be had here.
Right.
What I just wish is that it did have the ability to create a version of these characters that had as much dimension, had as much that made an impression as strongly and as fiercely as that original Child's Play. I mean, we didn't really get a chance to like compare people's performances to the original, but look, I don't think Aubrey Plaza is uh is competing with Catherine Hicks. I don't even think Gabriel Bateman is competing with the original actor who played Andy. I think those people were still the definitive takes, and these are a sort of scrambling attempt to retell this story for a new generation. So like I said, I like my Killer Dolls analog, so I will not be returning to this movie anytime soon. That being said, 2.6 is pretty low. I don't see what there is in this movie to offend even diehard Child's Play fans. Seems to be overdoing it. So, despite the fact that I don't have anything glowing to say about the movie, I can still say it's not that bad.
Interesting to say the least. I know. I actually love that you landed there, because it's an example of one of those times that even though the movie didn't really connect with you, you sort of have taken this angle of like, yeah, it wasn't everything that it could have been, but the audience in this case, and I correct me if I'm wrong here, but they're being a little bit harsh in your eyes. You think that despite your problems, this this movie doesn't seem to offend to that level of a 2.6.
Me? No, it doesn't offend me.
Yeah.
But I think I've been on the side of loving a remake too much to get into that fanboy rage here.
Right. Yeah.
Like, I think when you're somebody who wears your love for Rob Zombie on your sleeve like I do, I just don't think I have the right to rail against this movie for daring to have its own idea, like the audacity. Right. They mildly tweaked Chucky's character, and they brought in AI, or like I don't think I can be that guy. It's not my place to be that guy.
Good stuff, sir. And I guess that's where I'll come in here, and I'll say that this is where the fun begins. So here's the thing. I saw this back in 2019 when it came out. I was one of those people who got it as soon as it hit Blu-ray. I didn't get a chance to see it in theaters, and so I was quick to buy it when it came out, completely sight unseen. I didn't know anything about it as far as reactions went. I saw some people talking positively on a horror fan group that some people in the horror community may know about. And at the time, it became my favorite Child's Play film before rewatching all of the older ones. I've since rewatched all of those, and then we're kind of full circle back to this one. And watching it again, I had a lot of fun watching this. I do think some of the problems stuck out for me a lot more, but so did some of the things that I really enjoyed about this. Mark Hamill being the biggest one. If you're gonna go against Brad Dourif, if you're gonna go toe to toe, I think he's gonna lose that battle. But I don't think he did. I like to think that he was in a completely different arena than Brad Dourif, and had room to become a portrayal of the character that it would grow on people who maybe didn't like the Child's Play franchise as a whole, such as myself. I think this movie has a lot working for it, not as much working against it, despite my problems that I had with it. I think there's so much to enjoy and have fun with here, and so much that both fans of the franchise and people who don't like the franchise can really sink their teeth into and have a good time with. And it's for that reason that I'm going to say this reclaimed its spot at the top of my Child's Play ranking. This is my favorite Child's Play film. And I am going to give this a rating of actually good. I enjoy the hell out of this. Can't go actually great. I would put this just barely above Child's Play 3, which did become my favorite after our episode.
I don't even understand how that happens. That's amazing.
I don't either. It's like sometimes you just need somebody to give an opposing opinion, and one thing that I think we can pride ourselves on is we're pretty good about listening to those opposing opinions and being open to having our minds changed on movies.
Well, you are. The problem for me is I'm always right, so it's hard for me to.
except for
to
Godzilla 98.
hear those and Punisher
But
Warzone,
and
and
Punisher
there've been
Warzone,
a
and
few
several other
disagreements
ones.
there. Yeah, yeah.
Let's not forget the movies that you've brought to defend as well. But anyways, no. But all seriousness, I think we're pretty open minded when it comes to this show, and so when that episode came. And you said a lot of points that I couldn't argue against, and I realized I might have been a little too harsh in some areas. I rewatched that movie very quickly after we had recorded our episode, and
Mhm.
it immediately shot to that level. And this reclaimed its spot, but that does not change where I feel like this is the perfect way to reinvent the character, whereas Child's Play 3 was the perfect way to portray the original version. And that's how I see those two movies pretty much together at the top of that ranking.
It'll be interesting to see if maybe a similar effect happens on me next time I rewatch this movie. The interesting thing is I've never watched this movie with a friend. I
Oh,
realized that I've always been alone whenever I watch those. And I think Child's Play movies are great social experiencies. Like, it's a
yeah.
movie you can laugh at and with at the same time. Like, how amazing
Especially
is
later
that?
ones, yeah. Especially like as you
Especially
get into
later
the
ones.
90s, yeah.
Yeah, Bride of Chucky onward, you can really just
Yeah.
have a total blast. So I don't know, maybe if I could experience this through somebody else's eyes in a sort of vicarious social manner, I don't know, maybe something would click. I think I just didn't form a relationship between myself and this movie. And there's really nothing wrong with that. If other people
Absolutely.
like this movie, that's fine. I'm kind of surprised. This movie to me was like oh, it's a shame that I couldn't get into this like other people did. Like, that was my reaction walking out of the theater. So the way tides turn and the stigma against remakes, I can't endorse that stigma. I can't let this movie fall on the sword for that.
I think this show is a huge champion for not only remakes but sequels. Those are two types of movies that are really beaten up on. I think some of that has changed based on like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and Star Wars kind of changed the title of that a little bit because a lot of people say that a sequel in that franchise is the best Star Wars movie in some people's eyes, and in my eyes, truthfully. So, um, this show has really been a champion to those sequels and crossover movies and and remakes and all of these things that sort of belong of like the island of misfit toys for movie fans, and I like to think that we are a pretty good champion for those, and this movie is an example. Both of us on opposite sides of how we felt coming out of it, but both of us sort of landing on a similar side of the fence here. Neither of us did take the take that this was that bad to warrant a 2.6. So interesting episode. This is a unique one. I don't know that we've ever had somebody not to favorably feel like about a movie and still come out on the not that bad side. So this is fun.
Is that true?
Maybe. I just like to say shit sometimes, so I don't know. I
And the
mean,
fact
maybe
checkers are going to be combing through and they're going to nail us.
I'll sort of fact check myself in saying that I was fairly negative when talking about Child's Play 3, which is interesting because this movie is also it shares a name. It's in that same universe, I guess, as far as like franchises go. So that was really the last time I could see us being like, hey, I didn't connect with this movie, but it's not that bad. But
Mhm.
this one just it felt different for at least my experience here. I don't often see you dislike a movie or at least like not connect with it and
I
fall on
was
that not
like
that bad side.
trying
Yeah,
to
right. Yeah,
remind you that I don't hate this movie. I don't even think I
exactly.
dislike
Yes.
it. I called it watchable, which
It's
is a
just not
backhanded
connected.
compliment, but it's a
Yeah.
compliment.
Right.
I really don't have strong feelings about it one way or another. And to me, like a 2.6, like, if I'm not mistaken, I think that's Rob Zombie's Halloween territory, which, as much as I love those movies, I know why people hate them. I don't see why
Yeah.
you would hate this.
I think Rob's first one is at a 2.7, which is higher than this, and I think his second one's at a 2.4, which is lower than this.
Well, that's rude.
Um,
That's
yeah,
just that's scummy. People shouldn't be allowed to. No.
Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 is a masterpiece, and you're not going to tell me any different.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh my
But
gosh. Just like
oh god,
uh,
you know what? Like one of these days, we are going to have to put our money where our mouth is, and we're going to have to bring that movie on the show. And it's going to be a day that I think We are here. If it's recorded, we will record for God knows how long. If it's live, God help us all, because we will be there for too long. But for now, Child's Play 2019 is in the books, and we have given our thoughts. We would love to hear other people's thoughts about this movie in the comments. Maybe you'll open my eyes to some criticism to the movie. Maybe you'll open Gabe's eyes to some things that he didn't like, if you are an appreciator. So we'd love to hear from you.
Remember, be an appreciator, not a hater.
Yes, give any movie that we cover
GM
the not that
trademark.
bad bump, no matter whether we hate it or love it. If this show accomplishes one thing, I want it to be everything we talk about. I want one person to come away from the episode and give the movie a good rating, even Waterworld. I want it to come out on the better end of the show, despite what we had to say about it. So, hopefully this movie will be the same. If you have any questions about where you can find us, let's say you're listening to us on Spotify or watching us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, wherever. If you want to find us on other platforms, we have a great source for that, notthatbadpod.com. We have all of our links to all of our social media pages, as well as our platforms where we post this show, both video and audio versions. So please check our website out. We got some other exciting stuff on there, such as bios about your 2 favorite bad take artists, and several other exciting things, backlogs of episodes. So definitely check that out if you're a fan of us. But one thing that's also there is a link to our Patreon, which is also patreon.com/notthatbad. Sir Gabe, what do they get if they come and enjoy the benefits of our Patreon?
Free stuff. Well, not technically free, because they did pay us, but
you paid us, yes.
Yes, that payment comes with additional benefits.
You'll be a not that bad friend with benefits.
You get access to exclusive content. Since we're talking about the benefits,
yes,
you also get merch. That's right. You can literally wear your love for the show on your sleeve if you so choose.
Yeah, you can you get a sticker if you subscribe at a certain level or above, but you can subscribe at any single tier, even our lowest tier, if you want to contribute the bare minimum. No, contributing anything helps the show. Even just sharing and commenting helps the show. But if you do want to contribute and you don't have much to give and you want to give us something, do not feel obligated to go to higher tiers, because you get a lot of the same things at the lowest tier, including our specials that we publish on Patreon. We have several specials throughout the year that we will continue to post, and so we hope that you'll enjoy them. Some of them have not even left Patreon. We have several episodes covering the Leprechaun franchise, if you're a fan of that. We covered Santa's sleigh last Christmas. We got an exciting and fun Christmas special coming up this year. So head on over if you want to give us that extra level of support. At the end of the day, though, like, comment, share, subscribe, whatever you want to do to help the show. We appreciate it. And Gabe, is there anything else that you would like to drive home before you take us out?
Yeah, just that we are back in full swing. We will be doing a special in December that we're very excited about. We're going to be doing a little tournament, a little fight to the death. That's all we'll say for now, because the holiday season will be upon us, and we're excited to share with you guys the first of a special event that has been cooking for a while. So with that being said, it's time to take us out of here. I'm Gabe.
I am Connor.
And this is Not That Bad, saying this one was for Tupac.